Okay, let's share the page. We're not going to finish, Dafka not going to finish tonight. We'll try to get as far as we can go to the last Amud, in the last page of Sanhedrin, on page Kufyud Gimel Amud Aleph, 113a. And next week, Mir Hashem, we're going to finish the Masechta, make a siyum. Avi, if you want to share something to say at the siyum, we'll have hopefully enough time. The last pieces of Gemara, like last week, are not easy. They cover a lot of there's a lot of rules that we have in Gemara and in Halach and how we learn Torah Sheba'al Peh, the written Torah. So, but we'll try to get through it as best as we can. We're middle of the subject over here. I'm going to go back a second. We're middle of the question is about Meiser Sheni, second tithing. So we were trying to figure out, the Mishnah says with regarding to Ir Hanidachas, the city of idol worship, that if there are second tithings in the city, the second tithings have to be buried. I believe, yes, it has to be buried. The question is, in what scenario is it? Second tithings belongs to the person who's giving it. That person has to either eat it in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, or the person has to eat it, or could redeem it, eat it. Then once it's redeemed, then it's regular food. So of course it would be destroyed. Why would you have to bury it? And the money has to be taken to Jerusalem to buy things in Jerusalem. But it has to be in Jerusalem. The question is, in what scenario do we have to bury the second tithings that the person can eat it? Because he says, where is the city of idol worship? If it's in another city, so we bring proof that as long as it hasn't left the city on its way to Jerusalem, it for sure doesn't belong to the person. Because it should be able to be used still. Why does it have to be buried? Why? Because it's not used. We learned about with regard to challah, you don't have to give challah if it still hasn't left. So the question is, so what's the scenario? And if we're talking about that it came into Jerusalem, if the second tithing comes into Jerusalem, so the question is, you should take it out. You can't take it out because it has to stay there. It totally has to stay there. It shouldn't even be buried because the walls are koilet. Once something enters Jerusalem, as in the second tithings, the wall doesn't let it. You're not allowed to take it out. So how could you take it out to burn to bury it? So we're trying to figure out what is the scenario of the second tithing. So just go back a drop to the end of the last piece. So it says like this. So we answered. So what are we talking about? So we're saying that we're not going to do the Rashis. So we're talking about Elav B'Gvulin. We're talking about second tithings that come from outside of Jerusalem. Viktani Gonzu, it has to be buried. So it says no. La'ilam Dir Acheres. V'asku L'Gava V'Hoch Ma'askin in Shnitma. So it's talking about that second tithings that come from a city outside Jerusalem. Hey, Bruce, we're just doing a little chazar from page 112b on the mamish at the bottom, at that last page. We're talking about second tithings that belong to the city of idol worship. So we're kind of in mid-conversation. It may be hard to follow if you weren't in the last class, but we'll be finished this piece soon. So we're talking about that it's a second tithing that comes from another city, and it went to Jerusalem. But the second tithings became impure. Means that the food became impure. Someone non-pure touched it. And you're not allowed to eat second tithings that become impure in general. It's nothing to do with the idol worship city, the city of idol worship, but the second tithings have to be kept in a status of tahar, of purity. So let the person redeem it. How do we know that second tithings come to Jerusalem and become impure? So what are you supposed to do with it? So Rabbi Lezer says you could redeem it, meaning give money to the value of the second tithing and now buy something pure with it. Talmud Loimer, so how do we know that you can do that? It says, then in the laws that the Torah talks about, in a case where a person in general could turn the value of second tithings into money and breathe the money into Jerusalem. So seemingly the verse says it's talking about if the food is far, you live in Tiberias and you don't want to schlep the food. So then you take the money, you put a value into money and you use the money to buy food in Jerusalem. So seemingly the verse is saying it's too heavy to carry. But seis doesn't mean carry. It means even eating. You can't eat it. Why can't you eat it in Jerusalem? Because it became impure. And how do we know that the word se'es doesn't just mean to carry, but means to eat? There's a verse that says in Bereshis, Vayisim Maseis Meis Panav, that he took his portion to eat from in front of the other person. So what are we talking about? So clearly, if it comes into Jerusalem and it became impure, we still have a way to move it. Why? Because you could redeem it. Why do you have to bury it? You don't have to bury it, just redeem it. And then use the money to buy something else, and now you could eat the other food as non ma'aser sheni, which is chulin. So it's talking about that you already bought something with the money, and what you bought with the money became impure. So this is where we're holding. So now the question is, so what happens? Let's just forget about the problem with this piece is because seemingly it has nothing to do with city of idol worship. It's just the laws of second tithings. So we'll see in a second. So the question, the situation is like this. A person, let's say, brings money to Jerusalem. Why do you bring money to Jerusalem? Because you had second tithings in Tiberias. You didn't want to take it. So you brought money. You come to Jerusalem, you buy something with it. You bought food. And then whatever happened, your food became impure. You're not allowed to eat the second tithing in an impure state, even if you're using money to buy it. So what do? You have to bury it. This is why you have to bury it. Just redeem the things that you bought with money. Just like you could redeem the actual second tithings, why can you redeem what you bought with money of second tithings? The Gemara says, go and redeem it. So this with the things that you bought with the money of second tithings, redeem it with a third thing. Let's say you have apples, you transferred it, you sold it for money, you took the money to Jerusalem, you bought apples again. You don't have to buy apples, you can buy anything. You bought apples again, those apples become impure. Fine, so resell those apples to someone else and redeem it. Take the money, the value of the apples, and buy something else. Transfer the value into money, and now go buy apples a third time. Now you keep it pure, be careful. So because we learned that halakuach bekesem ma'aser shenitma yipade, that the Tanna Kama says that if you buy something with monies of second tithings that become impure, the food that you bought becomes impure, you could still redeem it. What do you mean you redeem it? You sell it and you have money now, and you take the money and you buy another food that's pure. So there's another opinion. The opinion is Rabbi Yehuda. The Amr, he reads not yipad that you could redeem, you cover, you have to bury. So the reason why in our mission it says second tithings have to be buried, because it could be talking about that second tithings, that money came to Jerusalem and the things that you bought became impure, and then according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, you no longer can redeem it, therefore you have to bury it. So what's the obvious question the Gemara asks now? Why are we talking about that this is monies that come from a city of an idol worship? It has nothing to do with idol worship. These are just the laws of second tithings. Even if I was a righteous person who had nothing to do with the city of idol worship, and I transfer money to Jerusalem, and I buy something with that money, and it becomes impure, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, I have to bury it. That has nothing to do with the laws of Ir Hanidachas. So why is this mentioned in the Mishnah? That if you have monies that went to Jerusalem, you bought something and became impure, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can no longer redeem it, you have to bury it. It has nothing to do with the laws of Ir Hanidachas. It has to do with the laws of second tithings. So Rashi says, go and redeem the second money. So Mashanik Rabbi Yehuda, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. You can only redeem if you bring the actual ma'aser sheni, but if you brought something with the monies of ma'aser sheni, you can't redeem it. And that's why we say that second tithings have to be buried. Let's just see the Rambam, Reb Steinsaltz quotes the Rambam in what's the law, right? Because we have an argument. According to the first part opinion, you could redeem monies, things that were bought with monies of second tithings, if it becomes impure. When a person gives second tithings, if you open up Devarim, a person does what's called vidui. You confess, so to say. In the confession, you tell God, I did not eat the second tithings in an impure manner. So you cannot eat second tithings if the food becomes impure. The question is, if it becomes impure, could you redeem it? It means you move the holiness from the food that became impure to another food, right? So then you're redeeming it, you're passing it over, and that food stayed pure. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't redeem it if you bought something with monies of second tithing. You can only redeem if the second tithings itself, according to Rabbi Lazar, come to Jerusalem, the actual apples that you picked of second tithings, then you could redeem it. So what's the law? Because of the Mishnah, the opinion that argues in Rabbi Yehuda holds you could even redeem value. So he says like this. What's the halacha, Rebecca? He closes the halacha like this: food purchased with second tithing money that became impure by means of contact with a primary source of ritual impurity shall be redeemed in accordance with the unattributed Mishnah. I mean, the opinion that's not, we don't know who that opinion is, but the Mishnah who argues in Rabbi Yehuda says that yipada, you could. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. The Gemara continues. So what's this have to do with the city of idol worship? So here the Gemara says an interesting answer, and then we're going to finish this piece in second tithing, I believe, and move on to the next complicated piece. It's talking about you brought food of second tithings from the city of idol worship into Jerusalem, and it stayed pure. And for instance, the neful mechitzos. This is a possibility; it could have happened. Hey, Shuki, on page 113a, when they're still in this complicated piece of second tithings. That what happens if you come to Jerusalem with second tithings and then the walls of Jerusalem collapse? Right? Could have happened in the time of destruction. Or I don't know, maybe the walls of Jerusalem collapsed during the times of the first or second temple. That could happen. So the walls collapse. The mechitzes, the walls of the temple collapse, of the city of Jerusalem collapse. So what did we say before? That why, if you have second, if a person's a wicked person, all their possessions have to be taken back to Jerusalem to be burnt, taken back to the city of idol worship to be burnt in the public square. Right? So if you're a wicked person, it has to be brought back in. You have second tithings, you went to Jerusalem. We said, no, you can't bring it back in because the walls are holding it in. The walls don't allow, halachically, for you to bring food out of Jerusalem. Once you bring it in, you can't bring it out. You're not allowed. It's a prohibition to take second tithings out of Jerusalem once it enters the city. So here the case is, what happens if the walls fall down? What is the law then if there's no actual physical walls standing in Jerusalem? You come into Jerusalem, the walls are there, and then the walls fall down. The Rav has the opinion. The fact that you have, once it enters the city, that the walls now say you can eat it, because the second tithings before it enters Jerusalem, you can't eat it. You can only eat it in Jerusalem. So biblically, once it enters the walls, now you can eat it. But likloit, that the walls don't let you take it out, it holds it, it gathers it, means you're not allowed to take it out. That's only rabbinic. It means the rabbi said you can't bring second tithings into Jerusalem and bring it out. Once you bring it in, you have to eat it. When did the rabbis institute this rule that you can't take it out? Only as long as the walls are standing. But if there's no walls, they can't. Then there's no longer holds the food in. And because you brought it into Jerusalem, it becomes permissible. Now that you've been found guilty as being a member of a city of idol worship, they say, well, you got to take it out because you can't eat it, because anything that you own has to be burnt. Bring it back to the city that you worshipped idols, and it gets burnt at the city square. And you can't burn it because it's something significant, it's something holy, so bury it. So that's why it has to do with the city of idol worship. That if a person brings impure second tithings into Jerusalem and is about to eat it, finds out that he's been a member of this kind of group that served idols in a majority of people, and all his possessions have to be, his or her possessions have to be burnt. We're not going to burn it because it's not respectful to burn second tithings, but you cannot eat it, you have to bury it. And why? How is that possible? Because the walls fell down. I mean, so obviously the likelihood of such a case is very unlikely technically for that to happen. But as far as the law goes, it's possible. It means the mission is describing a very unlikely possibility, but it's still a possibility. And therefore the law would be in such a unlikely possibility that the walls have collapsed that you would have to bury the second tithing. Okay, we'll finish that piece on second tithing. We're moving on to the Rashi. We're talking about second tithings of a city of idol worship. that stay tahar, that stay pure. V'asku l'gaveim brought it to Jerusalem. Let the person eat it. The hakatim mechitzas, because now since the walls have, so to say, taken possession of it, you can't take it out. After it entered the city, the walls of Jerusalem. Damarava mechitzas le'echel dayraisa min haTorah, mitzvahs le'echel lifnim min ha'chayma. That the fact that you have to eat it inside Jerusalem and the walls make it permissible, that's biblical. Av mechitzas likloi, to say that the walls hold it and don't allow you, prevent you. It's a prohibition to take the second tithings out of Jerusalem. Shia mechitzas that it doesn't allow you to redeem it any longer. Once you bring it into Jerusalem, you can't say, you know what, I don't want to eat these apples in Jerusalem. I'd rather go make an apple pie at home. So I'm going to sell it and you can't bring the apples out of the Jerusalem. You have to eat them. Or for whatever other reason, is only rabbinic. And in our case, the other reason is because your possessions have to be destroyed. When did the rabbi say that gathering in the walls is only as long as the walls are standing? As long as there's walls standing, you can't burn it. But if the walls collapse, you could take it out, and then you would have to bury it. Okay. Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah. What if you can't finish them because you're full?
So then you have to what they would do is they invite guests. You could have others participate in it that are pure, but you're not allowed to bring it out. You're not allowed to sell it, bring it out. If it's then I think it would rot or something. But you're not allowed to.
And how long do you have to eat it?
As long as long as you come there. I mean,
you could stay there a week and finish it all, or invite guests.
Yeah, but they would what?
They could stay a week, finish it all, or
yeah. And I think in the laws of Ma'aser Sheni, they were kind of constantly trading with people. They had to eat it as Ma'aser Sheni, but it means you don't have to eat it yourself. You could trade it. It stays Ma'aser Sheni. Like you could go to someone and say, I have 1,000 apples. I know I don't eat 1,000 apples. So if you eat and you have meat, so let's exchange the meat for the apples. You could eat the apples, but you have to eat it pure, and I'll eat the meat. Like you could barter with it, but it has to stay. It stays holy.
Okay.
Okay, the capacity of the walls of Jerusalem to enable one who partakes of the second tithing's produce outside of the walls of Jerusalem is flogged for violating a Torah prohibition, as the verse states. You may not eat within you may not eat within your gates the tithings of your grain, of your or of your wine, or of your oil. It means you can't eat it outside of Jerusalem. You have to eat it in Jerusalem. But what's the mitzvah lechitza liklait? What does it mean, the capacity of the walls of Jerusalem to admit? It is prohibited to take a second tithing produce that entered the walls of Jerusalem outside those walls, even if it is a second tithing taken from demai, meaning that you weren't sure if it's second tithing or not. Produce with regards to which there is uncertainty whether it is tithe. This is because once it's brought inside the walls of Jerusalem, it's immediately admitted by the walls. That means once it's admitted, you can't take it out. The prohibition against taking such produce out of Jerusalem is by a rabbinic decree. And because it's rabbinic, it only applies as long as the walls are standing. Meaning to say, today, if we do Ma'aser Sheni, I mean, not the way we do it, but there's a kind of way of doing it. Today, there's no such thing as the walls of Jerusalem gathered. There is no walls of Jerusalem. I mean, the walls that we have standing are not considered the walls of Jerusalem of once upon a time. Okay. Again, difficult pieces of Gemara, but we have a few more difficult pieces of Gemara, so we're going to continue. The Mishnah continues. Kisvei Kodesh Ganzu. What happens if you have articles of sacred scrolls and you're in a city of idol worship? You can't burn a Sefer Torah. What do you do with things that are of sacred scrolls of holiness? So it says you bury them. So if you have anything holy in the city, you bury it. Tefillin, mezuzahs, etc. You bury them. You don't burn them, obviously, in the public square. Masnisim d'loik Rabbi Lezer. This mission is not going according to Rabbi Lezer. Why? The Tanya Rabbi Lezer says, "Kol ir sheish ba afilu mezuzah achas einin nasas Ir Hanidachas." Imagine that. If a city has even one mezuzah, means the entire city. Again, I said we started when we learned about the city of idol worship. It never happened in history. So forget the fact that the unlikeliness of a city of Ir Hanidachas to have second tithings that entered Jerusalem pure. The walls of Jerusalem collapsed, and it had to go taken out. The unlikeliness of that to happen, the whole law of Ir Hanidachas never happened. It never happened in history that you had a city that was burnt because, means you had individuals that served idols and they could have been punished as individuals, but that the city was destroyed and there was a majority of people. There's so many, it's so complicated to create an Ir Hanidachas, it never happened. But it says that even if, imagine this, one of the conditions according to Rabbi Lezer is that the entire city can't even have one mezuzah, because the mezuzah is sacred. Because we said that everything in the city, all the spoils have to be destroyed. And if there's a mezuzah, there's a prohibition against burning sacred things. Meaning to say that our Mishnah does agree that you can't burn the sacred things. Our Mishnah says you have to bury it. Rabbi Lezer says no. In theory, it shouldn't be buried; it has to be burnt. But you can't burn sacred articles. So it means if there's a city that has a mezuzah, the city can't turn into Ir Hanidachas. So according to Rabbi Lezer, it makes it even more complicated. I mean, how many cities there are there today in the world? A metropolitan, forget Eretz Yisrael. Imagine a metropolitan anywhere in the world that doesn't have one mezuzah. See, I mean, you have small villages maybe outside in the outbacks of America and Europe, and there's definitely places in Asia that don't have a mezuzah. But is there a big city today, a proper city today, that doesn't have a mezuzah? Yes, Shuki. You're on mute.
I'm just kind of curious if this is, I know it's a completely wild shot here, but like if we're similar to the story of Avram kind of like begging to find if there was even like one holy person there, in the story in Bereshis where we're just trying to find one reason to save the city even, right? Is this something similar to that where like if there's even just one mezuzah, then that city is worth like considering not an Ir Hanidachas?
It's definitely similar in concept. I don't know. The difference over there is that you could say that Avram Avinu was just trying to find virtue. Over here, it's just part of the laws. The technical laws is that Rabbi Lezer says. I mean, our Mishnah agrees with that because the Mishnah says you should bury it. Why Rabbi Lezer says that? It means Rabbi Lezer disagrees that that if you have to burn it, you have to burn it. He says there's no excuse to bury it. There's no way to get out of bury it. So if you can't bury it, you has to burn it. But you can't burn it because you're not allowed to burn a mezuzah. But yeah, it's good. It's a good point. I mean, basically, it's the same idea. Basically, saying that that's kind of finding a way not to have to make an Ir Hanidachas. But again, imagine a city today in Eretz Yisrael. I don't believe there's today one city in Eretz Yisrael that has Jewish people. I mean, it could be there's a city of Jerusalem, non-Jews, or the city of Palestinian Israelis that have no mezuzahs. But to say that there's a Jewish city today in Eretz Yisrael that doesn't have one mezuzah doesn't exist. I'm confident to say that. So here it says that if the whole city has to have not one mezuzah stand in the city, which means also according to Rabbi Lezer, it means everyone has to be wicked. We're talking about it says it has to be majority of the city, and there's righteous people in the city. We're talking about righteous people that don't survive but don't even have a mezuzah on their door, right? So it says, he says, it means our Mishnah doesn't go according to Rabbi Lezer, because he says you're not allowed to loy sasuchen is a prohibition of burning. It means you have to burn idol things that belong to idols, right? But loy sasuchen, you should not burn them. It's a continuation. The verse says to go out and burn everything that belongs to idols, but don't do what you do to idols to the God, meaning don't burn sacred things. So you can't burn a mezuzah. Again, the obvious question is why won't Rabbi Lezer say you could burn it? If he's saying it's kishlolol, it means the argument between Rabbi Lezer and the Mishnah is that Rabbi Lezer says lo shalol shemayim. I mean, the Mishnah says that's not part of your spoils. A mezuzah doesn't belong to you. It's spoils of God. It's sacred. Rabbi Lezer says no. A mezuzah is yours. It's your spoils. It's a sacred spoil. It's one of your spoils that are sacred, and because it's yours, it has to be burnt. There's no way you could bury it. It has to be burnt because it says spoils, and it's your spoils. But you can't burn it because it's something sacred. So therefore, you can't have an Ir Hanidachas unless there's not one mezuzah in the city. Again, the commentaries bring down. What about the Hegedish? Hegedish also is what we call the animal. So there's a difference that Rabbi Lezer would agree that animals are not yours, whereas the mezuzah is yours, which is an interesting idea. Basically, that a mezuzah is not like something godly in your house. It's something godly in your house that belongs to you. It's yours. That's a mezuzah that belongs to you. It's your house, has to have a mezuzah on it. The chsiv, how do we know that Rashi says, how do we know it's the idea that you're not allowed to burn a mezuzah? The chsiv, evadtem es shemam, you have to eradicate the idols, mina makam mahu, from that place. But afterwards we have a verse that says, lo yisasu chen l'Hashem lekechem, you're not allowed to do what you do to idols, to godliness. And if a mezuzah, hoyev chsiv by askaris, there's God's name in a mezuzah. You can't burn a mezuzah. Mishum kra, because there's a prohibition saying you're not allowed to burn a mezuzah. And according to us, it says that I think what he means over here. That according to the opinion of the Mishnah, it's not included in spoils. It's spoils of heaven. According to Rabbi Lezer, that would be your spoils. Or he means in Rabbi Lezer, is that we agree that we also learn from Shalosh Shemayim that that's not considered spoils. That's get buried. But Rabbi Lezer holds that if not for the fact that you can't burn sacred things, you would burn the mezuzah in theory. Okay, I believe that's what Rashi means. Let's continue. Next piece. Rabbi Shimon says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very satisfied if we do the laws of a city of idol worship properly. Then we said there's an argument between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Kiva says that Rabbi Yossi Glili. Rabbi Kiva says that if you implement the judgment on the adulterous city, I ascribe to you credit as though you have sacrificed an entirely burnt offering before me, like an oila. And Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yossi Glili disagree as to whether one may convert the ruins of an adulterous city into a gardens and orchards, right? So I think Rabbi Kiva says you can. Rabbi Yossi Glili says you cannot. Rabbi Yossi Glili says you cannot. You have to just leave the city standing. And this is how we're going to get into the final discussion about Jericho. What the laws of the prohibition Joshua made that you cannot rebuild Jericho. The question is the Jericho in the times of the first temple. We know that people lived in Jericho. If that was the same Jericho, or not, but that will be discussed in a little bit. But there's an argument if you could at least turn it into orchards or gardens, make it into a big park. Why can you make a city of idol worship into a grand park or an orchard? So that's an argument. So the Gemara says, Lema bid Rabbi Abin Rabbi Iloi kamiflagi, that the argument of Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yossi Glili, if you can turn a city of idol worship into a garden or an orchard, depends on how one understands a ruling of Rabbi Abin, who said in the name of Rabbi Iloi. What did he argue? What does he say? The Amr Rabbi Abin, Amr Rabbi Iloi. Rabbi Abin said it in the name of Rabbi Iloi. Okay. Again, these are very hard ideas that are brought down quickly in the end of Sanhedrin. We know everyone who davens, who says the last portion of the Karbonis before we start Hodu is Rabbi Shmuel Omer B'Shleisha Shermidas Atar Nidreshes. There's the 13 attributes, means there's 13 rules that Rabbi Shmuel took out of, I believe, the 7 rules of Hillel the Elder, to how one understands the learning of Torah. There's 13 rules of Torah. What are the 13 rules of Torah? How you view a verse when you have 2 verses, when you have a general statement and a particular statement. There's it's a whole study on its own to understand what are these 13 attributes of Torah. One of them is what's called klal uprat. You have a general statement and then you have a specific statement. The question is, why would the Torah say something general that includes everything and then be specific about a certain part of that general statement? Okay, so here we're going to understand this, one of the rules of klal uprat, that he says like this: Kol makom shatemoitzi klal basei uprat beloisasei ein danyan oisi beklal uprat. The general rule of klal uprat is, like Rashi is going to say, that when you have a general statement and then the Torah goes out and to be specific, the specific is to tell us how to understand the general statement, right? What is the meaning of the general statement? That only works if both the general statement and the particular are either a prohibition or a positive commandment. But if you could, it's very possible that you could have within the same situation both a prohibition and a positive. For instance, if you find a lost item, you're walking in the street, you see a lost a mitzvah. So the mitzvah is to Hashavas Aveda, to return the lost item. And there's a prohibition to ignore it. So there's one is a positive, one is a prohibition. The positive is to return the lost item. The prohibition is to not ignore it. In our case, in the city of idol worship, we have the positive commandment to leave the city in ruins. That's a positive commandment. Leave the city of ruins. And then we have a prohibition to not rebuild it. So we have both a positive mitzvah and a mitzvah saseh, mitzvah slow saseh. Reb Oven says that when you have one positive and one prohibition, and let's say the positive in our case is a general statement, the city must stay in ruins. What's that mean? So ruins means anything? Or you can't do anything with it? I don't know. And then the prohibition says don't rebuild it. Don't rebuild it would mean I can't make houses there, but I can make other things there. So in theory, based on the rule of klal and prat, we should say that when the Torah says leave it in ruins as a positive commandment, and then the Torah says don't build houses there, don't build, and building would mean houses, is to say that the prohibition is teaching us about the positive commandment, that when it says leave it in ruins means to not build houses, but you could make it into orchards. That's generally the rule of klal prat would work here. But Rav says no, because the leaving it in ruins is a positive commandment, and the prohibition of not rebuilding is a prohibition. So the prat, the detail, can't explain the general rule, and therefore the positive commandment has to stay that you don't do anything with it, although the prohibition is being specific about only building homes, and therefore we don't say that the prat teaches on the klal. And therefore, in order to fulfill the positive commandment of leaving it in ruins, you can't do anything with it. And that's the argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Kiva. Do they agree with this statement that when you have klal prat, it only works if it is either both a positive commandment or a prohibition? But if one is a positive statement, the other one is a prohibition, they can't teach each other. Okay. So that's Rashi. That's something, again, this is difficult ideas because this is the idea of klal prat in general throughout Torah. If the Torah has it, like I said, if you have a rule, and then you have a specific. The specific is coming to teach us on the whole rule. That only applies if they're both positive or both prohibitions. But if one's a positive, one's a prohibition, they can't teach each other. In our case, that's the case. With the positive, Allah is to leave it in ruins. That can mean anything. You can't do anything. The prohibition says don't build. Like say, okay, so I can't build houses, but I can make. It's coming to teach us. I can't build houses, but I can make orchards. Okay. Klal be'eseu prat b'loisasek. Keep going. In our case, he gives an example. The prohibition, the positive commandment is v'hoisatel oilam. It has to stay in ruins. Klal, that's the general rule. It doesn't say specifically what you have to do. It just says leave it. Means to say you can't make anything. You can't make gardens. You can't make orchards. Means means then you have that's essay. That's the positive command. Then you have a second verse that says, don't build it again. Building means houses. Binyan batim, which means houses. But that's a prohibition. Is aimed done in b'chlal prat. Then you can't have the rule of the rule and the specific. In general, what we would say regularly would be that the prat of don't build houses is coming to teach us about the rule, which means that the only thing you're not allowed to do is build houses, but you can build gardens. The Leisase, Pirashu, in this case, you won't say that it's an explanation of the rule. That what did it mean in the general statement that you have to leave it in ruins means only for building homes. But I could build gardens or orchards. Because we don't apply them together. So therefore, we have two separate statements. We have a crow, we have a pasuk, we say each one is its own statement. It has to stay ruins means anything. You now do anything with it. You have to leave it totally as is. Okay. I'm going to go a little fast in this Rashi because we go into. So the question is, why does the Torah say specifically "Lo binyanoid"? Don't build homes. If the positive commandment is that you should just leave it as is, so why would the Torah then say a specific statement? Don't build homes. So he says like this: "Avlaganis upardesim shari." We don't say that it's coming as klal prat, but two separate statements. Kamar the pasuk saying. We don't say that the specific rule of don't building again means it's coming to explain the rule, the statement of leave it in ruins, which would mean that you are allowed to build gardens. Ella, mili mili v'haisa ta'alayim pardesim leisim na'oid kol upardesim leisim na'oid, which means, what does it mean to not build again? Kol b'binyan sheba'olam, any kind of building. Afilu l'gardens pardesim, which would include gardens and orchards. Leisim na'oid, you shouldn't build again. V'dashinin le'le davar. And so what does it mean? It means shahayu b'chlal. If you have something that's in the rule, the rule is leave it as ruins. Leave it as ruins means you can't build anything. Then the Torah comes and says specifically, it's not only coming to teach us about that it only means not to build again. Haya, v'lam yatzil lahakish lacha ma binyan miyuchad shu yoshev b'nei adam af kol binyan kigoyin ganetz partarsim. So why does it say don't build again? It's not coming to teach us that you're not allowed to just build homes. You're not allowed to build anything. But you're not allowed to build anything for the use of people. A garden is for the use of people. An orchard is for the use of people. Again, this is because it means when the second rule that he's coming on, that Yatzim min Klal is not coming to teach us about just building, it's just coming to define that this, that it says a general statement, you're not build anything again, means anything that's for use of people. Not just a home, but even the garden means the same. The statement of don't build, leave it in ruins means you have to leave it in ruins. So why does it say don't build again? It says don't build again to teach us that it has to, you're not allowed to have any use for people in it. Although there's other uses aside for buildings. Okay. I'm just going to leave it as is because these are complicated concepts. Rabbi basically suffer ain't done in Kirabab that we don't apply the klal prat like Rabban says. We call mili, and I have to leave it as a total ruins. That's to say is that to build homes is a prohibition. Okay. It's a difficult concept, but this is what the Gemara says. Basically, to put it in short, according to Rabbi Yossi, there's two statements. The statement is a positive commandment to leave it in ruins. That remains. And the prohibition of not building is just coming to say that it's not allowed, you're not allowed to do anything that has any use for anyone. It means it doesn't mean to say only buildings. It just means that just like buildings is something that a person could use, so too, there's anything that has use for people can't be used, including gardens, including orchards. Okay, if not for Reb Abin, then we would say it only means you're not allowed to build homes, but you could build orchards, because the pasuk says only homes. And according to Rabbi Kiva, less like the Reb Abin, he doesn't agree with Reb Abin. And Rabbi Kiva says, therefore, you could build orchards and gardens. Omar, less like the Rabbin, one holds of Reb Abin, one does not hold of Reb Abin. Okay, Rabbi Kiva suffered done into like Reb Abin. Rabbi Kiva says, no, we have klal prat, and klal prat is that whenever you have a rule and the particular is coming to define the rule. And in our case, the definition of the rule is you're not allowed to build homes, but I could build gardens. And Rabbi Yossi says no. The particular is not defining it. Why I'm saying it's complicated is because it is defining, but it's defining it not in limitations, but in concept. Meaning, Rabbi Yossi also agrees that we have to ask ourselves, why does the pasuk say not to build? So it's not coming to limit to only building homes. It comes to explain. Not a limit, but explain that it means any kind of use for people. As long as there's a use for a person, you can't do it. So that's what he means when he says over here that means there's sometimes when the Torah says something, it's not to limit the rule, but to explain the rule. There's a difference when something is limiting the rule or explaining the rule. In the case, according to Reb Abin, the pasuk is coming to explain the rule, meaning anything that would have use for people, which includes gardens. People could use a garden, that's use. According to Rabbi Kiva, it's coming to limit the rule. And limit means only homes, it wouldn't include gardens, which gardens can be built. So the difference if it's coming to lilamed or it's coming to limit. Is it coming to teach us or is it coming to limit the rule? That's the difference. I mean, again, these are concepts in Torah. I mean, Torah has different ideas of when a pasuk says something twice. We have a lot of times repetitive statements in the Torah. The question is, why does the Torah repeat itself? So Rabbi Yishmael says there's different ways of structuring the repetitivism of the Torah. Is the Torah coming to repeat itself to define it by limiting the rule, or is it coming to explain the rule? And if we can't limit the rule, so then it's explaining the rule. I mean to say that it includes gardens and orchards because that's of use of people. just like a home is a use of for a person. Okay, if I know this may not be easy to understand, but there's too much to talk about to continue on it. So let's go further. Gemara says, like the Kuli Ami Islu Darbavin. Everyone agrees with Rabavin that when you have a prohibition and a positive commandment separating the statements, you can't say that the prat is defining as limiting the rule. Again, this is even more complicated to understand. So what's the argument? That in the statement itself that says it's coming to explain, it says Loi sivna oid, don't ever build again. Oid legamri masha means absolutely nothing. Means Rabbi Kiva agrees that's not coming to limit the rule. It's just coming to tell us you can never repeat what it once was. You can't destroy Sodom and build Sodom again. Means you can't build what it once was, but you could build something else. It never was a garden, right? What did he say? They say that Assad, the senior, destroyed a city in Syria and turned it into a parking lot. So turning into a parking lot, it never was a parking lot. Now he's turning into a parking lot. That's something else. So Rabbi Kiva says it's not about that the rule is defined by the detail that he argues in Rabbanan. He agrees that if you have a positive commandment and a prohibition, you can't say that the prohibition is teaching the positive commandment, limiting the positive commandment. But you could say the word oid, it says never again. Why is it adding the word oid? It means you can't just build what it was. But it wasn't a garden before. Why can't I build a garden? It was a city. Again, so let's just learn Rashi. The Kuli Ami Isli Rababin. Everyone agrees to Rababin. Rafila Rabbi Kiva, even Rabbi Kiva agrees. Ir Hanidachas nasa ganetzu pradim. So why does Rabbi Kiva allow a person to make a city of idol worship into gardens or orchards? Not because he disagrees with Rababin. The Vadi Milsa Kamifarshin. V'haisa tel olam. B'mai b'binyan batim d'lai sivna oid mashmalei b'chol binyan d'chol binyan. The Kesarva oid the Kamaisha haisa. But the difference is he agrees that the fact that it says that loi sivna don't build means that you can't build anything for people, not just houses. It's coming to explain. But the fact that it says ever again what was, only you can't build what was. It means if there was orchard and gardens before, then you can't build orchards and gardens. That Rabbi Kiva agrees. But you could. But if there was never orchards and gardens there, then you can make orchards and gardens. Only means what it was. What it once was, you can't do again. But if it never was gardens or orchards, why can't you make gardens and orchards? Umar Savar, and according to Rabbi Yossi, oid legamri means you can't build anything again. Like you say, never again, or forever. You should never build again. It means the argument is not, everyone agrees that the detail of a prohibition can teach us about a general statement of a positive commandment. But the question is, what is the prohibition itself? The prohibition just says that you can't build what once was. According to Rabbi Kiva, according to Rabbi Yossi, it means you can't build anything. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, Tanur Rabbanan. Let's go further. Next piece of Gemara. If you have cut trees in the city of idol worship, then you're not allowed to use them. It has to get brought into the city center and being burnt. What happens if you had trees that were standing in the ground? They're still connected. Mutarim, then you can leave them. Shalir acheres, bein telushim bein mechubarim asa. Of a and then we'll see what this means in a second. He says that a detached tree and by contrast, trees of another city, whether detached or attached, are forbidden. So what does that mean? What's that mean? My Ir Hanidachas. So what does it mean in another city? Amar of Chizdei. What's another city? Jericho. Means a regular city of idol worship. You leave these trees that are connected. But Jericho has a special exception. When the Jews destroyed Jericho, when they came into the land with Joshua, quickly recap the story. The first frontier of the Jewish people when they entered the land was Jericho, right? They crossed the Jordan River. And they do the whole story. They surround the city 7 times. They walk around the city 7 times. They only leave Rachav and her family. Everything else is destroyed. What does it mean, destroyed? Destroyed means destroyed. Even trees that were connected get destroyed in Jericho. But another city of idol worship that gets destroyed, only this detached trees gets destroyed, but trees that are attached don't get destroyed. So Ir Hanidachas in this case means Jericho. Jericho and Joshua had to be totally destroyed. It was a total destruction for God, the city of Jericho. And then Joshua made a covenant and a curse. He curses the man who will ever rebuild Jericho. You have to remember, today, Jericho, I mean, anyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael knows, drive down towards the Dead Sea Road, right? You go out of Jerusalem, go through Mount Scopus, drive down that Dead Sea Road. If you go down to the bottom of the hill, Jericho is a big Palestinian city. Now, Jericho was a city. Yericho was Anshe Yericho. When it says in the Gemara, Anshe Yericho, that the people of Jericho would daven, we're so holy. It talks about the city of Jericho, right? In Chassidus, it mentions this all the time, that the people of Jericho were so holy that they didn't even say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vod. Right? How do we say Shema? We say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And then we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vod. Then we say V'Havta. Why do we add in the Torah? It doesn't say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vod. Why do we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vod between Shema and V'Havta? So Chassidus explains. Because in order to really understand what it means, the unity of God, we have to say it in the Malchus, in the idea of kingship. And then we could have V'Havta, and we can have love. It means we have to connect to God's kingship, kind of the fear, to be able to ignite the love for God. The people of Jericho were so holy that they didn't say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vod. They just said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'Havta. So that means the people of the city, we know that. We know the city of Jericho was rebuilt. The question is if this is the same Jericho that Joshua destroyed. But Joshua said, cursed is the person who builds Jericho again. He says, meaning Jericho is Yericho. You're going to build it. So the curse is, you shall lay the foundations with your firstborn, means you're going to bury your firstborn when you start to build the Jericho. And when you finish building the foundations and you put up the doors, right? What comes last? The doors? You're going to do it with your youngest child. That was the curse Joshua gave to anyone who dares to build Jericho again. The Gemara says, Mechubarim mutarin. Okay, talking about the trees. The tikboitz v'sarafta amrachmana. Why could trees that are not in Jericho, we're talking about a regular city of idol worship, why don't we cut down the trees that are connected? Because the Torah says you have to gather. The only things that have to be done is to gather it and burn it. But the trees, you have to cut it. Cutting it doesn't say in the Torah you have to chop it down. Chopping down is another requirement. That's a third requirement. Chopping, gathering, and burning. The Torah says to gather and burn. So the fact that you would have to chop down, which is talisha, to disconnect or to uproot, that's a third thing. And the Torah doesn't say you have to do three things. You have to only gather and burn. Something that needs talisha, needs uprooting, then that could remain. But by Jericho, not like that. By Jericho, even the connected trees were destroyed and forbidden. And this is what it says. Joshua made a covenant. Ora ish curses the person who tries to build Jericho again. Vikara kedarish v'aza b'bchayri sadan. And the pasuk means that with your firstborn, you're going to build the foundations. When you come to put the doors up, it's going to be at the life of your youngest child. When you put up, by the time you put up the walls, your youngest child is going to be destroyed. When was Jericho rebuilt? Okay, again, where do we find Jericho in the Tanakh? So we find Jericho in the Tanakh by, at least I'm not an expert in Tanakh, if someone remembers earlier, we find Jericho in Tanakh by already Elisha, right? Elisha goes into that the people in Jericho had Elisha's the prophet right around the time of Ahab and his children. So what happened? Elisha has the people in Jericho, we learned about it. The people of Jericho had a business that they would bring water because Jericho's water was salted. But then he went and he blessed the people of Jericho that the water should be healed, meaning the water should be drinkable. And then the water carriers got upset because he took away their business and they cursed them. And the bears came out and ate the people, the whole story. So but we've seen people who were living in Jericho in the times of Elisha. And like I said, Anshi Richai, and Yericho is brought down later in Talmud. I mean, once it was up, it was up. The fact that the Palestinians live there now doesn't mean that it was destroyed in between. The question is if the Jericho that they rebuilt is the same Jericho now. That's what we're going to discuss now, really. And we're not going to discuss it as a proper discussion, but that's kind of what the Gemara is going to be discussing in a buy-around way. Okay. He brings down the halacha. Deriving benefit from trees of an idolatrous city is forbidden if they are no longer attached to the ground. You can't just use it as lumber. Deriving benefit from trees that are attached to the ground is permitted in accordance with the Braita cited in the Gemara, which is our Braisa, which says that only if it's this, it has to be disconnected, but connected trees remain. Okay. Now we learn what is the now that we mentioned Jericho, we're going to go a little further as far as we could go. Next week we will be making the siyum, and because the Gemara is easier going forward, we don't get stuck. Those who want to prepare Shuki, Avi, anyone who's been here learning the Bruce, people who've been, anyone really who wants to share something at the siyum, we're going to have a little time. We want to share something about your take on Sanhedrin, how you enjoyed it, and the questions you had, the difficulties we had, what parts were more enjoyable than others, or just prepare something, an idea. Feel free to share something, prepare something for next week. We'll make a siyum, and I have to find out exactly how to do it. But let's just go a little further. Tanya, lo yiricha Hashem ir acheres, lo ir acheres Hashem yiricha. The prohibition is two things. You're not allowed to build the city of Jericho, even if you call it another city. Right? A person says, okay, I'm building the ruins of Jericho. I'm going to call it Shechem. I'm going to call it something else. No, you can't rebuild Jericho, even if you call it another name. You can't build another city on the name of Jericho. Possibly, I don't know, I have to check. I didn't check, I should have checked. Possibly, when they rebuilt Jericho, and the Jericho we have today is not the biblical Jericho. Although it makes sense, it is, because they crossed the Jordan. Anyone knows, again, if you're familiar with the current Jericho today is we're on the bottom by the Dead Sea, which is not too far from the end of the Jordan River, right? The Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. Today, Jericho sits at that area. First of all, it's not necessarily that's the way it was then. Dead Sea could have been lower or higher. If the Dead Sea now is receding, if the Dead Sea was higher 2,000 years ago, it's very possible that the Jordan ended up much more north. If the Dead Sea could be much bigger, it could have been much bigger in biblical times than it is today. Even since I've been in Israel, the past 30 years, the Dead Sea has receded 30%. And that's because people are misusing the waters, and there's other reasons why the Dead Sea is receding. The Dead Sea is unfortunately drying out. So that, I mean, even literally, if you go to the Dead Sea today in Gedi, you see old beaches that there's cliffs, because there was, like, where the old lifeguard stand is, the lifeguard can't see anything. It's 500 feet from the beach. But it used to be, even when I was there 30 years ago, the beach went all the way up to the Dead Sea, went all the way up by En Gedi. Now the Dead Sea is receded all the way deep in. So it could be that it's been receding for years. And it could be biblically the Dead Sea went much more north than it did. And if it did go much more north, then today's Jericho would not be where it was in biblical times. I have to check on that. Either I'm sure they have archaeologists who were able to figure if today's Jericho is the Jericho that it once was. So he says like this, but you're not allowed to build another city on the name of Jericho. How do we know? So this is where Jericho was built. Jericho was built in the time of Elijah the prophet, who's the master and teacher of Elisha, in the times of Ahab, King Ahab. King Ahab is, we learned about, one of the first kings. He was one of the people who do not have a portion in the world to come. And Ahab is one of the first kings of Israel from the north. The problem is also Jericho today wouldn't be part of Israel. Means it wouldn't be part of the north. It's all the way south. There's a lot of problems with where Jericho was. And if Jericho in the times of the Talmud, are we talking about the Jericho, or the Jericho that was built in the time of the first temple? But it says like this: Hiel, base Ha'eli, from the house of Eli es Yerichai, he built Jericho. But Aviram b'chayrai, at the cost of his life, of his elder firstborn Aviram, means his son Aviram died when he started to build Jericho. You saw that he put the foundations. Ubisguv, Tziroi, and in the life of his youngest son, Biskuv, Hitziv Dilasei, he put up his door. So Joshua said that whoever rebuilds Jericho is risking his children. That you're going to put the foundations with the life of your firstborn, and you're going to put up the doors with the life of your youngest. And that's what happened when Hiel built Jericho. So Rashi is like this: you can't rebuild biblical Jericho. When I say biblical, I mean the times of Joshua, and give it another name. You can't build another city, and call it Jericho. Even if you build another city, not in biblical, in Joshua times, Jericho. And you call it Jericho, it's a prohibition. The name Jericho has to be totally eradicated. Uchsiv, and it says about in the times of Achav, b'yamav bana Hiel beis Eli es Yerichai, that Yechiel from the house of Eli built, or from the area of Eli built Jericho. Whose days? B'yamav shel Achav, in the days of King Achav. Because he didn't listen to the curse of Joshua. So the reason why it's called the house of Eli is because El is from the covenant, that he violated the covenant and the curse of Joshua. So that's Yerichai. What did he build? La Yerichai atzma bana. He did not build Jericho itself, not the biblical city itself. El Ir Hanidachas, he built another city. I'm not sure if that's the Jericho we have today. Al Shem Yerichai, on the name of Jericho. Shekaru la Yerichai v'leis parsha minolan. Rashi seems to say there's no proof. How do we know that that's what happened? That he didn't build the Jericho itself. Again, once they built it, they never destroyed it. It's just funny and interesting about that. Like I said, the Gemara talks about Anshe Yerichai as holy people. And Elisha went to Jericho and he blessed it. He fixed the water there. And Rashi's saying, I don't know what's the proof that what's his name, Hiel didn't build the biblical Jericho. And when he built it at the life of Aviram Bechayra, his oldest son. Yasada, he put out the foundations. Aviram Rasha, he was wicked. So because it's seemingly not clear whether Aviram was wicked and therefore he didn't take it to heart. Maybe he died for his own sins. So he didn't take seriously Joshua's curse and therefore he continued to build it. And then his latest son, his youngest son, died. So Rashi says, so the Gemara says this, Tanya, Aviram Bechari Rasha. His son Aviram was a wicked person. So in the first son, we could say he didn't learn because he thought that the son died of his own sins. But by the time his last son died, he should have learned that what he did was wrong. And it doesn't say what he should have done about it. Aviram was skuv mayavid. What did they do? My kamer. What's going on over here? So Aviram b'chari hayil moed la'isa rasha b'skuv tziroi. Mimash mishnemer ba'aviram b'chari in yidesh skuv tziroi. So he's saying basically that from Aviram, his first son, he should have already learned about his last son, that something's wrong, what he's doing is wrong. Let's see how he says it in English over here. That they are characterized as wicked, and what is the Braita saying? The Gemara answers that this is what the Braita is saying. From the death of Abiram, his firstborn, that wicked man, Hillel himself, he was the wicked man, should have learned about the cause of the death of Shegev, his young son. Means the wicked person was Hiel for building Jericho. And his sons didn't do anything wrong. And why did his sons die? Because he violated the prohibition of Joshua of rebuilding Jericho. He was the wicked person. We're going to learn soon that there became a big fight between Elijah, Achav, and Hiel, because basically Hiel was Achav's friend, and Elijah curses Israel, the people of Israel, because Achav's friend built Jericho. That's what it seems like. So he said, but just to go a little further, I'm not sure we'll do that next week. So he's the very fact that Aviram is the firstborn, obviously Skuv, the next one, is younger than him. So why does the Torah have to tell us that he was the younger one? Means to say he didn't only have two children. He had a whole bunch of boys. And throughout building Jericho, all his kids died. Starting with his oldest son and finishing with his youngest son. By the time he built the walls, I mean, he was so obsessed with violating, I mean, he could have built any city, with violating the prohibition of Joshua, that he literally buried his children with the building of he just wouldn't acknowledge it. He would not stop. Aviram v'skuv ma'avid dekar l'Rishayim. Why were they called wicked? Any dash skuv the irei milsa be'an pinafshi. It's his own statement. Why does the Torah have to tell us that if Aviram is the firstborn, we know obviously that Skuv is the younger son. And the Maat HaMlemis come teach us that there were more than two sons. Skuv tzira shayikayver v'haylech ma'aviram v'ad skuv shehut tzir mikol means he had a whole bunch of sons. He buried all his children, all his sons, till his youngest with the building of Jericho. Let's just do one small piece and then we're going to stop. Achav Cheshvon have. Achav was a friend of Hiel. They were buddies. Cheshvon means kind of a groomsman. You know, we have Cheshvon when it comes to wedding, people who come to bring gifts for each other for weddings. So it's very, this is just so biblical. So Achav, we learned already, Achav is the king. He puts up a sign. Achav is, totally doesn't believe in God. And he's the biggest Talmud Chacham. He knows Torah, right? He's not just an ignoramus. He was able to tell us how we're supposed to cut the bread. So Achav he's not a nobody, but he's the biggest sinner. He serves the Baal. His wife has the Baal and all that, right? He doesn't have a portion in the world to come. So it happens, but his son now, Hiel, is sitting mourning because his son's died. So who comes to visit him? Achav comes to visit him to be Menachem Avel. So does Elijah the prophet, right? Top people. Elijah the prophet and Achav don't get along, but they both come to visit Hiel. Beit Time is the place of Beit Time. We're going to see what that means in a second. Yosef Omer Dilma Kimelat Yeshua Hachilat. So Hiel said, perhaps when Joshua cursed this, this is what he cursed, meaning to say he's acknowledging that what happened to him now is because Joshua cursed what he did. You shouldn't build Jericho, not with another name, and not another city in the name of Jericho. So Eliyahu says, you're right. Yeah, that's why your sons died, because you built Jericho and you weren't supposed to. He goes, so Ahab says to Elijah, now that the curse of Moshe, his teacher, wasn't fulfilled. Why? Because it says that if you're going to go away from serving God and you serve idols, God is going to be angry and close the heavens. It won't rain. Vahu Gavra, talking about himself, and this person, tell him. You want to tell me that Joshua is the reason why his sons died? He buried every one of his kids. And Chiel's maybe saying, maybe that's why my kids died, because I built Jericho. And Elijah says, yes, that's why your kids died. This is the conversation they're having at the Nichem Avelim. Imagine that's the conversation. And Achav tells Elijah, is that the case? Moshe, his teacher, says if you serve idols, God is going to close he cursed, it won't rain. And this person, meaning himself, Achav's taking pride. I put up an idol on every single elevation of Israel. Called Telem. Telem's not even a hill. Telem's like a little heap. And every heap of Israel, I put up another idol. He says, and the rain is so plainful. There's so much rain in Israel that doesn't even allow me to walk to the idols because the roads are so muddy. And you're saying all of a sudden the reason why he died is because his kids died is because Yeshua's curse does it? I don't believe in these curses. All right, guys, we'll stop over here. And we'll continue. Mir Hashem, the plan is to finish next week. And but this is a fascinating Talmud. Nothing's changed, right? No one wants to pay attention to anything. So Hiel is trying to make a little calculation that maybe my kids died because Joshua said not to do it. And Achav says, what are you talking about? I put up idols all over the place. Nothing's happened. Obviously, you think for a second the reason why you buried your children when you built Jericho is because it happened. Everyone got sick. The cold was going around for the past 7 years. All your kids died. No one else's kids died, but nevertheless, people believe what they want to believe. Nothing's changed. All right, everyone. Laila Tov, thank you so much. Again, please let me know if you want to share something next week. I think it would be nice if we can make a proper siyum. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.